You're listening to the AV-IT Amplifier. Each week, we'll feature voices and ideas that need to be amplified in the higher education and pro-AV IT communities. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. And now here's your host, Ryan Gray.
Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in again to the AV-IT Amplifier. If it is Wednesday, you know we're going to be here with a show for you, and today is absolutely no exception. I'm very excited to bring you the guest today, and I know you're going to have someone that you can listen to, someone who's got something to say, and someone who I think can make you think in new ways about stuff. So, Anne, welcome to the show, and would you please introduce yourself? Who are you, and what do you do?
My name is Ann Kelly. I am with Yale School of Medicine, of course, Yale University. I'm the assistant manager of events and classroom technologies. So anything that's on the upper division graduate level side, my office has their hands on it. So we're innovative parts, we're in research parts. So it's a great place to be to see innovations of technology.
Nice. And how do we know each other?
How do we know each other? HETMA, Higher Education Technology Managers Association. We've been hitting meetings now for almost 2 years, and actually got to see each other in person at InfoComm in June. So, and I can't wait to go to Vegas again and see everybody. So it's wonderful.
So, and booth construction and design extraordinaire for us. So I think if anyone experienced our booth last year, we owe a lot of that to Anne and the work she did amongst other people to bring that to fruition. So thank you. Well, it's good to talk to you today, and thank you for joining us. So I'm going to start with Yale. What if, for the rest of us lay people who work out in the real world, you know what I'm saying, us maybe lowly rural Arizona, what has the transition to Yale been like? And is it actually different, or is it the same thing, just a different name on the outside of the building?
I will tell you, it is walking into the spaces. They are no different than any other college. They're not put together any other different manner. They think of the professor, they think of the desk, they think of the computer in the same manner. And that was one of the reasons why I didn't hesitate to apply for something like that, because I went online, somebody posted a photo of a classroom, and I literally could name all of the devices in their classroom rack. And I was like, oh, it's not foreign. It's not too big. It's not anything I haven't dealt with before. You just are walking down hallways where they are doing amazing, amazing things 10 years ahead of what things are happening. So it's kind of like, you're like, oh man, what are they doing today? So you have to almost walk in with that, I don't want to say childlike, but you know these great things are happening, and what you are supporting is going to change people later on for the better, and everything that they do for research, for educating their students, is really at the forefront of advancing medicine. So I'm happy to be there. I'm happy to help.
That's awesome. And were you seeking out, kind of when you went to look for the next step in your career, were you thinking, someplace with a name, or was Yale just let me rephrase it better. Was the mission of Yale part of what really drew you there, or were you just looking for, hey, what is the next step of the career? Where can I put my skills to use?
It was a little bit of both. I have something working in small schools, working in the city, and actually even I'm from Buffalo right now. I'm broadcasting from Buffalo. The cliff, 2728 in higher ed. Let's talk about it for just a minute. If we're not thinking about it, you have to think about it. The lack of students, what is going to happen with the funding. SUNY, not specific. There are huge institutions that are listing futures of deficits with B's and not M's. You have to get ahead of that. And for me, I was in a good place with my family. I have kids in college or finished graduating college. I can be movable. How big can we get? Or how big is that radius away from the house, our family home, that we can get and still feel comfortable? And of course, Princeton, New Brunswick. Boston was a little too far. Even though MIT and Harvard were posting things when I was looking that, really seemed interesting and like brain food for that next step. But, Yale came back with, oh, hey, you meet our criteria. Would you like to have at least a Zoom interview? And, that process started. So, and it wasn't just them. I was looking at Syracuse. I was looking at Rochester, in Dartmouth had a really great extra position. I always go like, oh man, Dartmouth, the middle of New Hampshire. That would have been nice. But, it is like, it was next step because I was where I couldn't have gone any further. And I was at that other institution for 15 years, and I love them to death. They're still all my friends. But it was what's next for me, what's next for my family, what can I do to look at maybe the next 10, 15 years and do something interesting and at least maybe get an experience and be a jumping pad for something else, or ride that out and know I've done the best I could for higher ed and what I want to do. Nice.
So I know, as you said, you were if so, so you knew you were maxed out where you are, and like sort of how you continue to grow in the industry is something that you think a lot about, and I think you talk a lot about. So, how did you get yourself maxed out where you were to the point that you said, all right, now I have to make a jump to do it? And what is the experience of trying to grow yourself in the industry been like?
Yeah. Well, it's like I was at my other institution for 15 years, started the night shift. I had come off of massive event planning, and that's what they were looking for, somebody to do events, night events, weekend events, those bigger open houses, graduations, and that was my meat and potatoes for so long. For me, that was like, oh, cool, great. Higher ed was not really something I was interested in as a business plan, but I could do these things. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, hey, let's look at what is educating. My mom was a teacher for 35 years. What is pedagogy? What is this? And it's like those things in the first 5 years, you start going, oh, that's really interesting. Students have to ingest. Teachers have to be able to teach. And, I got to spend time designing classrooms from a theatrical sense. There's purpose. Things have to be executed for an audience to ingest what's happening on a stage, and then the actors, the teachers, the faculty, they have to be able to express themselves fully. And that was my background even before getting into special events, was the arts and theater, and I'm still involved with that, still crafting and creating. But that was our education. It doesn't matter the stage, it doesn't matter what needs to happen. You have an audience and you have a player. They need to be able to communicate. So my approach was not display units and pixels and diskettes and all that kind of thing. It was, what is someone doing, and where's their platform, and how do they need to communicate? So that's always, and instructional designers love that when I sit with them, and we're like, oh yeah, like that's a different perspective. And I'm like, but that's theater. That's getting up and professing for an hour and a half or 2 hour lecture. And those lectures, when they go 2-3 hours, I don't know how they just unhinge their brains for that long in one breath, and they keep going, and you do notes. And I remember being a student, and those classes just went by, and you learned things, but then how do you prepare for that? How do your professors get comfortable in the space? And that was always how I did it. Now, 15 years in one institution, you're gutting that classroom maybe the third time. You're getting quotes to do things the third time. You kind of go, this is it. I can't. I remember doing that 7 years ago. I remember running that. I remember cutting that VGA line out. I remember running that Cat 5E, and we have to update it now to Cat 6, Cat 6A. It's like all those things you go, this is no longer enticing and fun, because you are in those same spaces. They were preparing themselves for a different looking class, a different looking size, and where they needed to go, and the programs that they were changing. And I was like, that's much I had to get out of there. It's like, what's out there? What's out there for me? What's out there to have fun with, and reignite that kind of flair that you don't mind being 10:30 at night studying of like, oh, how does it do that? Or let me play with that QSYS programming in the back, and how can I do things? Like that needed to be ignited again. So instead of just like, it's the same buildings, it was a landlocked campus. They weren't rebuilding anything. They weren't taking over other spaces. I've done my due diligence and handed it off to a really great person. So yeah, cool. It was time. It was time to start hunting.
Well, when you say you describe an institution where it sounds like things are getting repetitive, it's landlocked, they're not doing anything new, versus how you talk, your excitement and passion, that does seem like a little bit of a mismatch. So Was it scary to leave a place that you've been 15 years, or is for you it's a no-brainer? Of course, I need to make this change.
It's two things. As a parent, it's terrifying because not only are you shoving those little birds out of the nest, I could be moving the nest. And, your house that you've had for 23 years, those things, it's like, my husband's still here. My house is still the family house. It's like, how do you balance that? And that's that maternal side. You go, I hope I'm making the right decision for everybody else, and sometimes you don't have to think in that sense of making those decisions that way, of just, or what's best for my family might be painful now. In 2-3 years, they'll love New Haven, and they do, because there's beaches and they're teenagers with girlfriends, or older teenagers, almost adults with girlfriends that love to visit and go elsewhere. And pizza, New Haven pizza. I mean, it's just like a great place to, to see as an alternative place to possibly call home in a few years. There's that which weighs on you for a long time. And then there's that, oh, wait a minute, they're building this building and I get to see these plans and like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And when we do these things and when this lab is built, like that's what do you give up? What do you balance that takes those big steps? And sometimes you tell your kids, do the thing that's scary because it's going to change you. You have to eat your words and do it when it works out in every other sense, but letting out that comfort blanket, letting go, like, oh, it's so comfortable to be where I am, comfortable. It's great, but it's like what gets you up in the morning faster. So that's where I am now. So
nice. Well, I can see, A, something you processed, and B, I have a hard time seeing you as the person that would overvalue comfort. That change would be in there. So, so through this whole process of growing, getting a position, moving up in where you are, moving to other places, you're doing this as a woman in even a male-dominated industry. And while on the surface, your story sounds maybe similar to what everybody has had, what's getting how are you bearing the lead in terms of what it's meant to be someone who doesn't look like the majority of people doing what we do?
Yeah, exactly. We get, we study, we get our certifications, we know the tools. I don't hesitate to pull a ladder out. I do now because I have a staff and a union that does all those things. I make sure that they have all the tools that they need. But at the same time there's that, I know how nobody can tell me something can't be done because I've probably done it. I've hung a 75-inch, 100-pound TV at, 12 feet off the ground. It's safe, it's well hung, and my fire marshal loves the way it was all put together. So I know how to do these things. Don't tell me it can't be done. And when you are the only woman in the room, and as at that Barbie speech that America Ferrera delivers so well, it's like you can't be these you can't be angry because they're telling you no, but you can't also be a pushover, because then you really are the person that sometimes you're on the phone, people are saying, well, are you your technician's assistant? Can we talk to the technician who's trying to do an RMA on this device? And you're like, wait a minute, that's me too. Why is my word different? Because my voice is female and maybe not somebody they're traditionally expecting to be. So you have, it's like you walk that tightrope as, to say a woman, there's a lot of people, a lot of different peoples that do this walk every day. And, it's like, it's funny. The younger people who have grown up with girls and Boy Scouts, and now it's just scouting and there's no, oh, boys this, that, girls do these things, like men who go into nursing and love it. It's the same kind of parallel. You have those barriers you break down, and when it's so normal for the younger people or younger group, and those are, I know, generalizations, I don't see that pushback of, oh, isn't this pretty, or these can flash some pretty buttons. I'm like, that's, tier 2 programming from this device to this core. Don't tell me it's just pretty little things. It's called, I know how to do that because I can and I did it. I don't just answer phones. That is no longer my job. And I know other people we've discussed this even at my meetings going, this still exists. This still has to, it's going to fade out. because I said, all those people that are so used to having a very diverse pool, they'll be like, really? Go watch Mad Men. It's a great example of women breaking that glass ceiling, or the ceiling, it's technical ceiling. And, it still exists. We still sort of do it. And I'm a Gen Xer. And, being the only girl on the crew, sometimes being the only girl in the room, I'm so used to it. Right. I am, it's like a thick skin. I'm glad people that are entering the industry now as, the first time out of college, or the first time with any experience, that might not be a relevant comparison for them. And I'm glad for it. Absolutely glad for it.
And so
that's long and winded. I do apologize.
No, that's perfect. Yes, I love it, because there's to follow up on two fronts, which is, one, you mentioned something that I'm sure I've said it on the show and before, but that is my excitement and faith in people younger than me is higher than people older than me. And sort of the root of my optimism for the future lies in that. When I watch, so my daughter's 18 in her first year of college, and her and her friends and other people, and then students, our student workers, and hear how they talk and interact and do things. I have that feeling. And then where I live is an area that's predominantly retirees, right? So there's this, we've got the people of the, they don't even teach people the kids how to make change in school anymore. Yeah, and I'm going, because they don't need to know it.
Me too.
And so anyways, I love that where the things that, look to the people younger than you and see the future. And it's so cool to hear you reflect that back. That's awesome. And then two is,
it's great.
A lot of and for fear of wading into waters, a lot of the discussion about women in a male-dominated industry gets focused around the things you said, but also including safety and experience at trade shows and those sorts of things. But but that everyday professional difference, you know what I'm saying? We know exists. So you mentioned you're Gen X, you've had to grow up with it. You've been the only woman in the room a long time. How have you dealt with it? How have you maintained yourself and grown? How have you had to do things different than your colleagues in order to move forward in your career?
First things first is let everybody be the little sister to someone else, because people don't abuse their little sisters. I know it's a real quick. I was my brother had all of his friends over at his house, and I was my brother's little sister. So you first thing you do this, maybe not the things you don't want to do, but you nothing is off the table. Heavy tools need to get moved. You move them. You be able to whip out, don't walk around with a clipboard and just delegate. Learn how to cut Cat 6. Do those things that maybe they're not expecting you to do. Do them well, do them clean. Make sure that, it's not nothing, even if you fake it till you make it, just, be able to put yourself in anywhere, but also empathize with with that role that you need to play for the moment, or the person that you're working with. So it's kind of you got to be flexible. At the same time, you have to know those words of how to call somebody out of just dismissing you because of who you are. And that's that wit. Sometimes I say things and I go, wow, that was really good. Where did that come from? But it's you sort of lock it up, and you don't want to be that witty, snarky comeback person all the time. But when you have to be, you have to be. But it's stand your ground. Practice those things. There was a person I used to practice my meetings on and my pitches on, who I miss dearly sometimes, and going hey, can you just look at this? If I do it this way, am I gonna come off as aggressive? And it's not how the project needs to handle, it's how am I approaching myself. And that's what sadly sometimes we have to work on, is what my approach is in the room. If I need to lead the room, how to be that leader, how to be clear and concise and not leave things open for, oh, well, she was emotional, or she missed the thing, or she was disappointed because we said we can't do this, or this timeline's not working out. And that's where, don't leave those things on the table. And that's what I'm saying. Sometimes it's you're exhausted from doing such simple things that maybe someone from a different perspective who walk into a room and maybe not think that, it's like, wow, why are you, it's like, oh yeah, and then go home and, got 3 kids going to soccer, whatever, you still have that role. Yeah, and I mean, even from afar, I'm still doing, it never ends.
You don't get to put it down at any point. But it sounds like that message of step 1 is don't sell yourself short. You know what I'm saying? You make sure, like you said, nothing on the table. Jump in. Don't play to stereotype. Don't whatever. And then the encouragement I would give is men who are around, like, make sure we're not predisposed to doing that. Giving people different roles, and take everyone on your team and give them those same opportunities, the same roles, and the same thing. You talked ahead of time and you used the word access, and I just committed one of the faux pas of podcasting, which is you're never supposed to refer to something the audience didn't hear, and I just did it. But that's because I'm an amateur. What are you going to do? What has been your experience, and how do you see the tokens of advancement, be it training, opportunity, vision, just the ability for people to see you as more than you are rather than just as you are? How has that been, and what have you had to do to gain access to the things you knew you needed?
I was always one to tinker. I tinker with everything. I take it apart, put it back together. When I was 6 years old, I took apart a Commodore 64 because I accidentally spilled stuff into it and figured out, it's just a ribbon and a few things. And then I also learned how to put it back together. So, like, hanging out with the guys, and in the 90s, if you hung out backstage, it was guys. So hanging out with the guys was... if I wanted to learn how to build scenery, if I want to learn how to hang out and do truss and rock and roll stage, you had to be there. You had to get dirty. You had to be able to do that kind of stuff, which is funny because now it's like you go to a rock and roll show and it's huge LED screens and everything else, and how much is this so parallel to what we do in a class? It really is. It's crazy. Parallel to what we do in a classroom. It's it's like you take a graduation and you take a rock and roll show, and 90% of the time it's the same tools. It's just 24 channel versus 96 channel. But anyway, it is that same sort of put yourself in where you think it's cool and it's fun. Get dirty. Maybe download that manual real quick on your phone, because you can now, and learn what it is that they're working with, and ask questions maybe when it's appropriate. But it's like, it is that learning how to just be aware of everything around you. Now, when I started getting into networking classrooms for the institution I was before, and being able to fight for either networking or not networking classrooms, it was, you need the training for this, or you have extra on this, but you need the pro level, you need all those things. So, and at the time, the institution really wasn't able to take that next step, and vendors were, this was right at the start of COVID, vendors weren't giving us phone calls. So what was it might have been 1 a.m. Oh, cool. Great. I could get this Kramer done. I could get this done. What was available to me, just hunt for it. Just dive for it. What products are you working with that have that? Now it seems things have settled. What's for free?
Yeah. What
can you do on your own? The same thing. The first time I went to InfoComm, it was the October COVID InfoComm in Florida. My institution sponsored me to go. I was shocked.
Yeah.
I did every class I could take. I sat in every learning session that didn't overlap, that I could still get under my registration fee. Just because it was like, I need to take advantage of this. And there wasn't a lot of show floor, so classes were amazing and the hosts were amazing. So you just really, I'm a sponge. I love being that sponge in that space and just, oh, cool. I have no problem raising my hands, and thank God I went to a lot of forums, and like you just say one thing and then this guy over there talks and the guy over there talks, and you just be aware of where you are in those spaces, of what's available to you. And then, of course, that was Prism. I saw the Prism Scholarship, and I was like, I am going to do this. And I did it. I probably could have afforded not passing the first time myself independently. I wanted to keep that for me. That was something I wanted to do. I didn't want my institution to sponsor it. I wanted it for me so I could take it with me and go with it, and actually be a benefit to the institution that I did this on my own sort of thing. Because this is one thing. AV is very interesting world because there's no degree. There's no, you have your master's. For someone in education understands, well, they have their MFA, they have their MBA. That's understandable. Well, I have my CTS now. And I'm definitely working on my CTSI. My designer, I don't know. That's a big one. That's one I'd have to take a month off just to study. But having that core group, it's like, it's afraid. But no, you shouldn't be. But at the same time, it's like, it's a D. That D is on a good stamp to have. That core group to study was, when I saw the scholarship, I was like, oh my God. And then they're going to sponsor the trip. Oh, great. Then I don't have to beg my institution to cover. And they still weren't opening up that travel just at that time. And I go, I'll study with people. I still get to go to Infocom. I will give back to that group as much as I can, and it's like, that was where I got my CTS from. And it really was just you hunting. And it wasn't just Google. It was the current secretary, Annie, that COVID Infocom. She's like, we have this group. We're taking a trust class together. We have this group. Look for us. Sign up. I think you'll be great. And that was when I was still in my small institution. So, I mean, she introduced me to the club. And it said, you put yourself in the places where you think you can gain most just absorbing and being around those sponges, and then sometimes you got to be the fat penguin, break the ice, ask a question, and that really does, maybe as a personality, I'm not a person that hangs out on the wall. I'll be like, oh, cool. Can I touch that? No? Okay, cool. I won't, but I'll be bugging you all night long, if you let me play with those things. So.
Well, it sounds like you obviously, someone who pursues and knows what they want to do, and the word that keeps coming to my mind hearing you talk about that is hustle. There is so much hustle in what you're talking about. I'm getting fatigued just listening to you talk about it, much less actually doing all that. But also, it sounds like the value you've hit things that have valued both a real depth of understanding in areas, but also a breadth of understanding. So, like you mentioned, like, I've got this Extron, I need another one. This QSys, but also I could get this Kramer. I could do this. And the myriad, because there's no, aside from a few things, there's the dependence on manufacturer training leaves us in a place where it can be really hard. And it sounds like you've gone that, instead of saying, I'm going to go for depth and breadth at the same time, and that has served you. Is that something you would recommend to other people?
Oh, absolutely. It's playtime. It's I loved having, and I still have access to a small space to do a mini mock-up and play, and what does that mean to play with something? And don't accept that first installation or that first programming as the best opportunity. What is it that you can make better? How can you make things better for the end users? And that's where I love that nuts and bolts of, right now it's programming into touch panels, but what's before is, if I push this button, how does that work? And what's the logical cause and effect? And unless, they said, you have to do it yourself sometimes just to see that it can be done, and then let your staff be able to deploy that ability for that, or that design or that capability of the space, because you said we are stewards for the act of education. So why is just because something turns on doesn't mean it's functional.
Right.
So that's where I take it apart. weld it back together, and
you
maybe
don't
hopefully
leave the
make it
stone
better,
unturned. You don't assume that, it's not good enough to know that this button does that. It's how and how is it doing that? Why is it doing that? And no one is going to know more than me about what's going on in this room.
Kind of, and it sounds like I'm a control freak, and maybe I am, but it's the that don't tell me I can't. And I know I've said that once before, but at the same time is don't tell me it can't be done, because I know it can be. That's where that tinkering and back dark rooms where, you walk in and be like, oh my God, if my CIO saw all this stuff all over it. But we've got a great group of people, in higher up positions that walk into our space and go, yeah, this is what an AV room should look like. You got, yeah, exactly. You got cables and parts and things, and it's just like, how do you fix it? How is this going to be better? Oh, hey, you got 20 minutes to fix something big. Where's your backup? What do you got to plug into? And that's, especially when back to back and your schedule is crazy. It's the same thing. How deep do I know? How deep does my staff know how to do this, and how to keep me prepared and them prepared for, these quick changes? Because nobody's 9 to 5 anymore. It's 6 to about 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
Now.
And you never know when something's going to come up, and exactly. We live.
Yeah. Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Well, I love that. That's Ann Kelly. Don't tell her it can't be done. You know what I'm saying? Don't do that. And if anybody listening wanted to find you, get in contact, learn about that PRISM scholarship, hear more about your story or get connected with you, how would they do that?
Of course, I'm on the Hetman page for the PRISM scholarship. All of that is centered from there at hetman.org.
If you're not a member, sign up at hetman.org.
Yep. And it's absolutely free. And of course, all the higher education members have a private close page, and that's where a lot of those things are posted. And of course, and then vendors are there. I am in LinkedIn, Ann.Kelly at Yale.edu, or C. Kelly. I'm the only one, but you see my my Yale reference there as well on LinkedIn.
Cool.
So.
Well, we'll link all those in there. A half hour goes so fast. Thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Thanks.
I'm now so enthused to wait a second, what should I be going to learn next? This is awesome.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Great.
Thank you for listening to the AV IT Amplifier. Tune in next week for more with today's guest. It'll be great, or your money back. Your host has been Ryan Gray. He's on the tweeters at Ryan_A_Gray, or find him on LinkedIn to connect. Please subscribe and give the show a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. This show is brought to you by higheredav.com. The views expressed here are not necessarily those of our respective institutions, employers, or sponsors. Everyone hang in there, go easy, and we'll be back next week.